best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is a video that can get misinterpreted, or at least you can read into it more than what's here. So I'm asking sort of a simple question. I want to talk about how writers used to want to be portrayed, or used to want their careers to go, and there seems to be a difference now. And but this is an observation, and so disclaimers apply. Don't reach out and contact and be a jackass to these people. I mean, you reach out and contact them if you want, but just don't be an a-hole about it, right? That's the thing. Don't go in there and kind of mock or tease or any of that stuff. And also, look, don't read like soft bigotry into various things. It's not there. So it's a legit question. In fact, if anything, I view this as something that is potentially helpful to some of the people I'm talking about. Granted, I'm sure many of the listeners right now will not have the same kind of altruistic motives at heart. That's fine. So once upon a time, in the world of comic writing, as was, book writing, movie writing, any kind of performance, which also included actors and others, there used to be this thing called I don't want to be typecast. And I distinctly remember Chris Claremont, Peter David, and I want to say Frank Miller, although I may be incorrect about that one, but I know the first two for sure. Did a talk or they did various articles, various blogs about how, they like to write different characters. They like to write different genres because they don't want to be typecast as just writing the same thing. And once upon a time, this was a concern, and directors had it, actors had it. If you start in too many kind of action films, you get typecast as an action star. So you'd see, actors go and they do different things. Will Ferrell, at one point, mentioned that he wanted to do some serious work, and he did, to avoid being typecast, just a stupid, funny man. He later kind of came out and said that, he realized that he enjoyed doing, kind of those comedy films. He enjoyed doing those things. And so he was going to worry a little bit less about what people thought he should be and just try and enjoy himself, which was a good realization for him to have. But in writing, this has been a concern. This has been something that writers have often talked about, needing to be careful with their career because they don't want to become just the Spider-Man writer, or this person can only write Superman. And this was, you would just see this pop up in a lot of different articles. Todd McFarlane once talked about one of the things about doing Spawn and kind of doing something different was that he was getting to be known as the Spider-Man guy. He didn't want to be the Spider-Man guy. So, this used to be a concern. So I feel it's different today, and it's different today because people are leaning into extremely niche genres of things. I'm reading some independent comics. I read, independent sort of. I barely consider Image independent, but these are writers giving us kind of a more unfiltered view of what they want to tell versus something through a corporation and editor. So shoe fits in this case. But in this comic I was reading, which was Sweet Paprika, which I like Mirka Andolfo a lot. I think she's a good storyteller. I think she's a good artist. I think I like her. I think she's a great talent. She's one of the people who come up more recently, sort of. And she's been doing work for a while, but just she's one of the more recent creators that you don't hear too much about, even though the work does pretty well, pretty fondly received, and it's just it's just considered strong. So I'm reading this, and she is also doing this terrible gimmick. At least for me, it was Sweet Paprika, black, white, and pink, and this comic, which was a kind of mini series, was about a demon and an angel. They're working, and there's a relationship. There's a lot of sex involved. It's a rom-com comic. It's not a superhero comic. It reminds me a lot of the kind of stuff that Rumiko Takahashi would do, but with more boobs and definitely more naughty bits. So anyway, very much a rom-com. Romance wins in the end. Spoilers. So in this Black, White, and Pink, a number of other writers and creators come in to tell stories in the Sweet Paprika universe. And as I'm going through this, the stories are fine. I mean, there's the first one was the best, and I this is definitely gonna people are gonna call BS on what I'm about to say, but Katana Collins wrote the first story, and I felt it was it fit the genre in my mind the best. I read the original series. This was dealing with Paprika's dad and kind of the relationship. Anyway, it was good. It had the same kind of condensed storytelling, kind of a sweet story, a little bit of nostalgia. It was a solid. I thought it was solid. That was the unfortunately the best story was the first one, which I always kind of hate in anthologies when it feels like everything goes downhill from there. But it was still good. Overall, it was a good issue. Except one story right in the middle, and as I'm going through it, I did not pay attention when I picked it up to who the creators were. I bought the comic, brought the comic home, and then I started just looking through it and didn't pay attention to who the writers were. So I was actually surprised to see Katana Collins' name pop up as the first story. I was like, oh, cool. I didn't know she did this, and read it and enjoyed it. And then I get a couple more stories in, and I hit the story by Steve Orlando. And so I see this first page. Steve Orlando's name is at the very top. It's the very first thing you see. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a story about two gay characters. No doubt about it. The one's going to be very nervous. The other one's going to be a little bit more dominant, and that's what's going to happen here. And I hadn't even looked down the page. I hadn't seen a single thing. So then I start reading it, and within one page, it's like, yep, it's a gay character. And sure enough, he's kind of the shy, effeminate one. And then there's the other one that is the more dominant one. And what follows is not a story. It's like a paragraph of, and they hook up and they have sex. And now he's now the more shy, effeminate one is feeling better somehow. You knew exactly what the story was going to be before you started reading it. And I started thinking, like, now if Steve Orlando does any comic, it's going to be this. If Vita Ayala or Danny Lore does a comic, there's going to be a loud, sassy black woman who is either fully queer or at least bi-curious or some level. It's just every story, all of them. And my thought here is isn't that bad for their career? Isn't this a negative? No, not that they're writing LGBTQ stories. They're writing the same LGBTQ stories. There's a vague shuffling of the mix, usually because of the artist, not because of anything actually in the story. And, I asked the question I asked at the beginning, in terms of managing your career, this is what people tried to avoid. You wanted to avoid being typecast as this person tells this type of story. That's the only story they know how to tell, this story. That's it. And yet here we are, and that's where this has gone. If I'm Steve Orlando and reading Marauders, Marauders was, I guess, is canceled now, a fairly unreadable comic. And it tells a lot of the same kind of nonsense. And this wasn't always true with Steve Orlando. If you go further back in time, you look at his work at DC, he actually wrote kind of different things. And he did Commanders in Crisis, which was about as one-dimensional as it gets of a story. And it was still relatively new, at least. You could give it that. It's like, maybe this was a story he wanted to tell in his heart, and he got it out, and good. But then it was like a dead end. That was all he does now. And I also think, by the way, you can't dump all the blame on these writers, because the editors are reaching out to the Vitas and the Danny, well, not Vita, but the Dannys, and hey, if you want a story that's going to have some trans overtones, call up Mags. you're going to need to do. And then they proceed to write the same story they've written 50 times. And at this point, if you're Steve Orlando, and arguably you should have a good 20 years plus in your career, easy. But what are the odds that they're going to give you any kind of book that matters? You think that they're going to give Steve Orlando a Green Lantern book? Not unless they're going to have Green Lantern be gay. You think they're going to give Danny Lore, I don't know, Iron Man? And let and then Iron Man is just Tony Stark, battling it out. And I think about these writers, they read comics when they were kids. Some of them worked in comic shops. And, clearly they, in theory, they enjoyed comics. But now they're stuck just telling the same story, usually with characters who very, very closely resemble themselves. Over the last several weeks, lots of people have made fun of Joe Glass because he's decided, for whatever reason, the thing to do is to just, lay out all the emotional support he apparently needs on Twitter and be kind of, I don't know, there's a weird dynamic there where, you have to know that when you're writing stuff that you're just going to get kind of mercilessly mocked for it. So he writes, I was really hoping for some Easter money so I could treat myself and in turn some lucky guys do some new sexy undies. But I guess I've aged out of Easter money now. And when you write that tweet and you send it, you know the response you're going to get. You're going to get people to mock you mercilessly. At this point, I have to believe that there's a certain amount of sick fetish pleasure that comes out of just making yourself look as absolutely pathetic as humanly possible and letting people kind of mock you. But the other part is Joe talks about wanting to be a comic writer. No one is going to hire Joe. The absolute best Joe can hope for is that everyone else is unavailable to write Iceman. And Marvel's like, I don't know, let's do a 4-issue series of Iceman where he is just thirsty and just nonstop pounding. That's what we're gonna have with Iceman. Who do we got? Everyone is busy. All right, I guess give Joe Glass a call. That's it. That's the only book. And you ask yourself, was there a world where Joe Glass had a really good Flash story or a really good Captain America story in him? Was there a Captain America fights Baron Zemo story that he had in his mind somewhere? He will never tell that story. He is typecast. And I guess my question to you all is, did I miss the memo where, it was bad to be typecast, where you actually worked really hard to make sure you showed that you have range? You can do a lot of different stories and different themes and different topics. Where we were there, and then somehow we moved from there to, let's just I will tell this one story. This one story, and just this one story. And I don't know. And I see more and more writers kind of slipping into this. Teenie Howard, who again I know a number of you dislike on this channel. I read the comments. But once upon a time, Teenie Howard did write kind of different stories. Now, as I'm looking at Teenie's work on DC, it is like it's the style. To me, it reminds me a little bit of when the Marvel parody magazine would parody Chris Claremont or Wolverine, and they would just use all the tropes. I'm the best there is. What I do isn't very nice, bub. And it would just be the, let's make fun of, and let's make Chris Claremont's writing as one-dimensional as possible. Now I'm seeing a lot of writers self-steer into that. And I find that baffling. So did I miss something? Or are we now supposed to, do we want to be typecast? We're okay. It's totally fine now if we just have one story and only one story to tell, and that's all we got, and no problem. That we're okay with that now, right? I guess. I don't get it. If I was Joe Glass or Steve Orlando or Vita or Danny or whatever else, I would be busting ass to make sure that it was 100% clear I could tell a different kind of story. I'm Mags. I would say, you know what? I'm going to do a story. It's just a solid sci-fi action story, and it's got great characterization, and there's zero hint of trans about it. Zero. I always wanted to write Connor Kent Superboy. Great. I'm just going to turn in the most classic, will get reprinted for generations to come, Connor Kent Superman. I'm not going to, I'm not going to do some weird ass relationship. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to prove that I can write an iconic story. And I am not, I do not need to be typecast as the one you bring in for this kind of comic. But apparently that's not important. No, I don't know. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Typecasting, bad, right? Right. I feel like the Anakin Padme memes. Right? I mean, right? Thanks for listening.